For every piece of land, you can walk out there and you can see that certain plants thrive there and certain plants don't. Don't beat yourself over the head and empty your pocketbook growing those things that nature didn't want there in the first place.
This episode of Voices from the Field is a conversation centered around two organizations helping the community in their own ways through sustainable agriculture and education. Stephen Lucke of Gardopia Gardens in San Antonio and NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialist Justin Duncan take a candid look at their organization's missions as well as the projects they have done and are doing and how those projects impact the community. Stephen begins the conversation. Let's listen.
Welcome, folks, to the Growing Our Future podcast, where we speak with professionals from the educational, health, and environmental sectors to highlight what's going on in the world. What's going on, Mr. Duncan?
So many things. So many of the things. So for me right now, we're doing a lot of planting.
Okay.
And
a lot of planting. For sure. It is planting season.
It is definitely planting season, and there's plenty of rain for us to get those things planted and watered in at the same time.
Right now, which I'm very thankful.
Well, Stephen, for my listeners, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, sure. So we're on the ATTRA podcast with NCAT, in addition to the Growing Our Future podcast with Gardopia.
Double whammy.
Exactly. Two birds. We are a education-based nonprofit that teaches people about healthy living and sustainable living. I'm here in San Antonio, Texas, where on the near east side of San Antonio, where we have a half-acre micro farm. In addition to that micro farm, we work with schools, churches, community centers, restaurants, houses. At the end of the day, we want everybody to grow a percentage of their food. We're still trying to figure out what that percentage can be realistically, but at the end of the day, we also want people to be connected to nature. So that's the work that we're doing with Gardopia. My personal background is in nutrition and biochemistry and healthy living, and I've become an organic farmer over about the past decade or so.
That's cool.
And what about you, man? Who are you?
And for me, I'm Justin Duncan. I'm a sustainable agriculture specialist with the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And through our ATTRA program, I deliver all sorts of organic-based programming all around the country. I work with various groups, from other nonprofits to universities to individual farmers. I'm trying to, really just teach people how to improve their productivity using organic methods. Working more in alignment with what nature wants of our land versus what we're trying to force our land to do.
What is you said organic? What does organic mean to you? Because that's a term that's been commodified and has definitions, but what does it mean to you?
So personally, to me, I believe that organic is using not only all natural methods, no synthetics, and that includes pesticides or fertilizers, fungicides, none of that stuff I use in my production.
Okay.
And then I also believe heavily in working with nature. For every piece of land, you can walk out there and you can see that certain plants thrive there and certain plants don't. Don't beat yourself over the head and empty your pocketbook growing those things that nature didn't want there in the first place.
Okay.
And I recommend that to all my producers. Find out what your piece of land actually wants to grow and stick with those things and grow those.
How do you determine that?
So I walk around and I look and see what's growing. That tells a story for me. If I see a bunch of members of the rose family, I know this land wants to grow members of the rose family. Stick with that. Don't go out there trying to grow a bunch of stuff that is anti-rose.
So being able to do plant identification would be key, because I wouldn't know personally what's in the rose family or what's in the bean family or what's in the okra family. I don't know.
Plant identification is key.
So botany, plant science,
field systematic botany, being able to identify things, understanding taxonomy, understanding how plant biology works, understanding ecological succession, because things that flourish in new soils or disturbed soils, pioneering type plants, they favor like bacterially dominant soils, whereas you have more settled plants like trees and things of that nature that need fungally dominant soils. So you have to understand that ecological succession, where your soil is in that process of going from new soil or disturbed soil to old forest.
Mm-hmm.
And so somewhere along that gradation is where your crops should align to.
That's different in the rural versus the urban. So urban would probably be a ton of disturbed soils, I would assume.
Yeah.
Right, with all the construction and just like all the development.
Yeah.
Versus rural could be a mix. I mean, there's been a lot of clear cutting.
There's been
a lot of grazing.
There's been a lot of tillage.
A lot of tilling.
And tillage is what
Yeah.
Disturbs the system.
Okay.
Because,
so rural has a lot of disturbed soil too.
Yes, all over this country. If it's not a forest, it's disturbed.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's us. That's pretty cool. So we've got these two nonprofit organizations coming together today that are both based on agriculturally educating folks on how to better their lives.
Sustainable organic practices.
Exactly.
And again, the reason I asked you that question is because, I think that people can take these terms and monetize them. I think that's what's happening like with USDA organic, right? Or OMRI, where you have to pay these exuberant costs to call yourself certified. So it's like you don't have to pay to be organic, right? You don't have to pay to use natural processes.
Mm.
You can just do it. I know from a financial standpoint that if you have a threshold of selling fruits and vegetables under 10,000, you don't need to get their certificate from the USDA. For OMRI, you probably have to pay for your products regardless, but that's not necessary 100%. So, tell me what's new with NCAT. What's going on with y'all 2023? We got ATTRA. We got some books here. What's going on?
So for 2023, I'm really excited because my SARE grant has finally coalesced from the ether and turned into a real thing. And
SARE, what's SARE?
SARE is Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education.
Nice. And which is a part of the USDA?
Yeah. It's through we're in the southern SARE region, which is administered by the University of Georgia.
Gotcha.
And so I've got a grant with two really fantastic organizations, Operation Spring Plant out in North Carolina, and SAFON, which is
some type of acronym.
Southeast African American Farmers Organic Network.
Okay.
And so we're doing
SAFON.
We're doing a cover crop research project that stretches from North Carolina to Florida to Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas.
Wow, that's a big little coast right there, Atlantic and Gulf.
Yep, it's very different from the normal SARE grant because usually SARE grants are focused on one state, or they are producer grants, or for on-farm research grants. What we did is we basically made a project that is a bunch of on-farm research grants or on-farm research projects for this broad area to look at which cover crops are best at hampering which weeds.
Cover crops to reduce weeds.
Yes.
And are these cover crops food producing, or are they good for animals? What's the benefit of having a cover crop versus a weed?
So, my cover crop research, I love for the cover crop to be able to do dual roles or several roles. Not only are they cover crops, but they also have some secondary income. Like a good example is Clitoria ternatea, which is the blue butterfly pea. And
which has these stolons, right? It spreads out a lot.
It vines a lot. Okay. The thing that makes it notable is that the blue flowers are used in Ayurvedic medicine.
Really?
Yeah, they're a medicinal herb.
Yeah.
And they make a really pretty blue tea that's high in antioxidants.
So I can harvest the flowers?
You
have to harvest a lot of flowers.
Though. Yeah. You can harvest the flowers, but it also builds the soil. And it's one of those cover crops where I consider to be Texas tough. And
it's Texas tough. Yeah.
We tested these down in South Texas in the crucible of the Rio Grande Valley summers. And
It almost reminds me a little bit like Johnson grass, but not quite. Because Johnson grass has those big roots that go out, but like it still has that big root network, right?
I haven't seen that.
Okay.
Because it's a vine, and so what
Gotcha.
it does is it sends out a lot of vegetative growth on top.
Okay.
But I haven't really seen it vine anywhere. I mean, underground.
Okay.
But yeah, it's one of those things where it stood up to 100-degree weather or over 100 degrees for 6 to 8 weeks at a time with no irrigation.
Wow.
It's
no
one
irrigation.
of the very
That's
few
tough.
that survive. And so I like that because, I don't want to have to baby a cover crop. I want to fire and forget. I want to put a cover crop out there, plant it, let it do its thing, and then come back later and either till it in or chop it up or whatever.
Man, I planted some winter rye in October. That stuff is pumping. It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
It's like huge. Like it's getting like 2-3 feet tall.
Yeah, winter rye will do that. But it's getting ready to start dying back and, getting out of your way.
Will the roots still live or no?
The roots will die.
In the right condition?
It's an annual.
Okay.
It's gonna.
So
die
it's just gonna drop those seeds.
if you let it go to seed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just cut mine recently because it was just too much. I was like, I gotta get it now.
You have any rabbits?
I don't have
You have any
rabbits.
livestock?
No, not at the house. Yeah, that's where I got it at. I need to get some chickens though. Everybody should have some chickens, right?
Well, yeah, they're a nuisance, but yeah.
Food, man. I'm
know,
about food production. I'm getting eggs. I'm getting chicken wings. I'm getting chicken legs. I'm getting it all, man.
You also had that rooster.
We had a
that attacked me.
rooster. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he met his match. I don't know how, but he met his match. But you know what? Like we've had a couple of progeny. So that was Goku. That was the aggressive one.
That was a
and then we had Gohan. And then Gohan had kids, and Gohan's kids are pretty much docile, man.
Really?
Yeah, really chill.
Oh.
So, it's nice because I feel like you can sell those type of roosters, like gentle roosters, right? That would be like a thing. Like I would buy a gentle rooster versus the rooster's going to try to kill me. But he's big though. So he still has the big genetics,
but he doesn't
have the aggressive genetics.
Yeah, because that rooster was trying to fight me that day.
Yeah, everybody.
Chicken coop. No.
Yeah,
so what?
R.I.P.
What projects are y'all working on now?
That's a great question. So, we're working with multiple school districts, including San Antonio ISD. We're in about 13 schools working hand in hand with their educators. One of the schools at Young Women's Leadership Academy Primary has a USDA Farm to School grant. So we're implementing the instruction of every student in that school and actually working on the cultivation of a 1.5 acre farm park, which is sort of a concept out of Oakland. If you've heard of City Slicker Farms, they have a 1.5 acre farm park. And, when I saw that, I'm like, why doesn't San Antonio have farm parks? But also in the Bay Area is the Edible Schoolyard. Alice Louise Waters has a 1 acre school garden. So we're trying to really create some high standard, high quality programming that can be replicated and implemented throughout the city. So that's really one thing that we're continuing to strive forward on. We're having our Food and Nature Education Conference up and coming, which this will be a part of it. If you're watching this, you are watching the conference. So, celebrating all the people who are doing great work here in the city of San Antonio. And so you're a statewide, or y'all are really a national organization, right?
Yeah.
You're a nationwide organization, but you're centered, at least one of your offices is here in San Antonio. So that's really cool. And highlighting so many organizations that are doing great work here in the region. Aside from that, we also have our Spring Grow-a-thon. So we're trying to track data on how much food is being produced in the city because there's not like a central database that says San Antonio consumes 1 billion pounds of food and San Antonio produces 100,000 pounds of food. Like there's not any information out there that's accessible to the public. And so what we want to do is collect some data to say, okay, we got a few people growing in their backyard. We got a few people growing at schools. We got a few people growing at community centers and parks. We got a few people who have local farms. This is what they're producing right now. XYZ, we can extrapolate that if everybody did that, or 1 out of 3 people did that. I just saw a stat recently that if 1 out of 3 people had chickens, backyard chickens, it would pretty much obliterate the egg industry. I'm not trying to get rid of the egg industry, but I'm also not trying to be reliant upon these systems that don't necessarily benefit us, because the cost of eggs have gone up, but the cost of me raising a chicken hasn't gone up that much. So, and I can actually raise my chickens off of just natural free range. I don't even need to go buy a ton of feed for my chickens. They can supplement them, but with all of my kitchen scraps and just natural foraging, my chickens can pretty much make it, right? So, trying to look at opportunities like that to create local food security, food sovereignty, to address, food injustice.
Don't have time to stay up to date on the freshest sustainable agriculture news, events, and funding opportunities? You can trust NCAT to keep you connected with our weekly Harvest e-newsletter. Subscribe today at ncat.org and get your weekly harvest delivered each Wednesday.
And speaking of that, you showed me this book right here. This is The New Farmers of America, retrospective 400 years, 1935 through 1965. Tell me a little about the New Farmers of America. What's going on here?
So, the New Farmers of America, that was a group of, and it was basically the African American analog of the Future Farmers of America. And, I personally don't have a lot of information about it, but this book was, interestingly enough, written by one of my advisors at Prairie View A&M University.
And that is who?
That's Dr. Cecil Strickland.
Dr. Cecil Strickland.
Yeah, he's the one who...
That's it. Professor and coordinator, agriculture and human resources.
Yeah, that's the guy who brought me into Prairie View and told me that, they were going to teach me all that I was going to need to know. Mm-hmm. And he did a good job of that. Him and all the other professors, Dr. Reyes and Dr. Griffin, Dr. Risch, and a little bit before my time, there was another guy named Oliver Smith. That dude was a legend in Texas agriculture.
Okay.
He was so good, Texas A&M went and took him from Prairie View and brought them up to College Station.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And then another great Texas agriculturalist was Dr. Poindexter. And, he was a legend in veterinary care, because people came all over Texas, and in some cases from all around the world, to have him treat their livestock. Man was a genius.
This is Strickland?
No, that was Dr. Poindexter. There was another professor.
He was at Prairie View?
At Prairie View, yeah.
Okay, and you went to Prairie View?
Yes, I did. I did my bachelor's at Prairie View. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at this. The New Farmers of America was a national organization of Negro farm boys studying vocational agriculture in the public schools throughout the United States. Became a national organization August 4th, 1935, and expanded to more than 1,000 chapters, 58,000 active members over a period of 30 years. That's big.
It affected a lot of people's lives. I mean, because back then they had what was called vocational ag, or vo-ag. And so
in high school.
In high school. And that's what, taught young people to be farmers. Mm-hmm. And, back then there was segregation, and so they had their own stuff for African Americans that was very successful. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you go and look at what the New Farmers of America did, like, they had their own programming, they had their own trainings, they had their own competitions. They had their own everything. Mm-hmm. And so when they joined with FFA, all that just kind of dissolved.
Sure.
And I saw a post this morning, and it was saying, it was a guy in FFA, a young black man in FFA, and he was asking, why wasn't there more taught about NFA in FFA? Y'all have these FFA conferences, and you have all the different FFA jackets, but you never see anything from NFA there. And it's like, that whole history is wiped out.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. I've heard of FFA. Mm-hmm. Never heard of NFA.
Yeah.
And when you look at the stats, and I just went to the San Antonio Rodeo, and actually that's something that happened for us in 2023. It was an amazing experience, right? These rodeos are huge stock shows. But when you look at the amount of inner city kids, BIPOC kids participating in FFA and 4-H, it's extremely low. right? So we have to increase those numbers because we've, as you're stating out right now, essentially when this occurred, when integration occurred, it became almost decimal, the participation.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to do. That's why we're in 20 plus schools in the inner city. Now, we don't do a ton of livestock right now. We do chickens. We got bees at Gardopia. We should be adding some rabbits. I want to do some goats. That's sort of next on my list of goats, but our spaces are so limited. So, something else we're looking at, and I just got selected as an Aspen Institute fellow, is looking at land access and land justice, because 97% of agricultural land is owned by European Americans. So land ownership, the majority of land in Texas is owned by white people. So there's no land ownership of Black and brown people, or it's insignificant.
It's quite limited.
Yeah, exactly. And if we can't change that, then we cannot participate in these activities to the economic benefit, right? As well, is really a big thing.
One of those economic benefits that urban youth or BIPOC youth are missing out on is there is a youth loan program through the Farm Service Agency.
Okay.
And it gives these young people $5,000 to raise project livestock. And
there's so many scholarships through the FFA and 4-H too, right?
Right. And so, by BIPOC children or inner city children not participating in these activities, they're missing out on so many opportunities.
Also, we got to raise the light, man. We got to make the awareness, because this information is out there, the opportunities are out there, but we have to connect those opportunities to those people, right? And to our people who, for the past few decades, have been missing out. So, I appreciate what you're doing. You inspire me with NCAT. Anytime I get those email blasts and those newsletters, y'all have over 300 podcasts. That makes us look baby. We got like 20 podcasts. I'm like, yeah. But y'all have some great people around you. So, how can people find out more about the work you're doing and more about NCAT?
So we've got our website, and our website is pretty robust. It's got a lot of information on there. We've got hundreds of publications on the ATTRA website that cover just about any agricultural activity you want to know about. And it's not just the agricultural stuff, it's the financial things, it's the marketing things, the business aspects of it. And it's just a pretty comprehensive spectrum of literature on that webpage. And then they also have, and before I really worked with NCAT, I didn't know about this, but they also have this really great internship or apprenticeship clearinghouse. So if you've got a farm, say you own Gardopia Gardens, and you want somebody to come out there and work for you, you can post a farm intern position on the website, and people from all over will look and see it, and then be like, okay, well, I match these requirements. Let me go work for them.
Okay. All
right. So that's one good thing. The other side of that is what's a crop you know nothing about?
Cacti.
You don't know anything about cacti. You want to learn about cacti. You go on there and you search the database and see if there's a cactus farm on there. Okay. And you go work for them. Okay. And that way you can learn on their farm using their funds. Yeah. Right? Because it's always very expensive to start up a new farming enterprise. So you go learn from somebody else and take out some of that cost barrier of learning how to do something, and then go back to your farm with that new knowledge. Sure. And apply it instead of beating yourself over the head. Yeah, no, trying to spend all your money trying to figure out how to grow cactus.
That learning curve.
Yeah, that learning curve.
Tough. So that's all on the website.
That's all on our website. The website is attra.ncat.org. And so people sometimes get confused. NCAT is the organization. It's the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And then ATTRA is our program. And so through
ATTRA.
Yeah. Through that program, we do just about everything. We do technical assistance for producers all over the country. Like people call me up or email me or whatever, hit me up on Facebook even, and ask me questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do this other thing? And I'm not just a talking head when it comes to agriculture. Like when I was at Prairie View, I managed the university greenhouse, and I had 17 acres of research plots.
17 acres. That's not
so,
a small amount. That's some
yeah,
work.
So I pretty much figured out what I like to call the nuts and bolts of successful organic farming here in Texas.
Yeah.
And this was back from 2005 until 2013, and I went through and did as much farming stuff as I could to learn what was not in the books, what was not available in the literature. Because when I started looking for information on how to grow things organically here in Texas, there was nothing out there. All the organic information was written up in like Wisconsin and New York and Washington State and Oregon and all these places up north where it really didn't apply to what we were going through down here. And so I got on the back of that tractor. I had the old farm guys teach me. They taught me how to work the field with the tractors, and I got all the implements, and I really assembled one of the greatest inventories of soil manipulation implements in the state of Texas, or probably throughout the South, because we had reciprocating spaders, we had rotary spaders, we had this thing, we had an Amont's rotary spader that did first and second pass tillage. It did seedbed preparation, and it did planting all in one pass.
That's
all in
nice.
one pass.
Oh, that's nice for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, efficiency is really important, especially when the bigger your spaces get, right?
Right. But yeah, so what I'm saying is, I broke my teeth in agriculture. I really learned. So I'm not just some random person with a college degree telling other people what I think they should do. I'm telling them from experience, like what insect problems I've had, what disease problems I've had, what weed, what issues, yield drag, all that sort of stuff. And I bring that to the fore when I'm dealing with my producers. And then the other great thing that I learned while I was at Prairie View is a man named Cecil Fry. He was one of the campus electricians. He was a beekeeper. Okay. And he, like in the world of beekeeping, this dude was a badass. Yeah. Like his bees are awesome. He's still around? He's still around.
I need some bees.
As far as I know, he's still around.
Queens.
He set me up with my first beehive, and he taught me, like every day. Like he would come down to the greenhouse and we would work, and he would teach me things about these bees. And so now I mentor beekeepers. Yeah. Okay. I teach people how to.
You got some bees. Hives?
I have hives.
Nice.
I've got 2 hives in Dale, Texas. I've got 2 more out in Waller County. I've got some beekeepers that I'm working with in Fifth Ward. They're doing some trainings. I'm working with them to teach some people how to keep bees. They've got an additional 3 hives. They lost a couple this past winter, and then I've got another producer in Washington County. She's got 4 beehives. Okay. So we're
spread out.
We're getting it together. We're spread out, but we're getting it together because the knowledge is kind of universal.
Well, that's why I think small livestock are a great investment, because chickens, I don't got to do a lot. Bees, I don't have to do a lot. Fish, if you do some aquaponics, you don't have to do a ton. And that creates that protein, that creates that sugar, that creates that pollination. Animal husbandry, right, is what it is. It's truly necessary. So that's awesome, man. Well, I know that you have a ton of knowledge. We could probably go for another hour. Here at Gardopia, I encourage people to come visit us. 619 North New Braunfels. They can come to our website, gardopiagardens.org. They can follow us on social media at Gardopia Gardens. On second Saturdays, we're at the Pearl, right down the street from here.
What's the Pearl?
The Pearl, it's a farmer's market. So it's on Saturdays from 9 to 1 and Sundays from 10 to 2.
What are your biggest sellers?
We don't sell a lot of things at the market. It's mainly about awareness and education. It's marketing for us. What we have been able to succeed is in our educational programs. providing education to schools, and then building gardens. So we build raised beds, we can install irrigation systems, we can install composters and rainwater tanks and chicken coops. So that's really something that the infrastructure that's needed for these systems.
Right.
And then our volunteerism. We have a ton of volunteers. Thank you to our volunteers who help us grow these spaces, because without San Antonio community service really stepping up, none of this would be achievable. So we're trying to create that critical mass of people who are doing, and people who are implementing, and people who are supporting. And it's happening. It's happening slowly, but it's one garden at a time is what I say.
One garden at a time.
That's
I like
it.
that.
All right, y'all. Well, adios.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.ncat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Rich Myers. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.